Welcome to the Chess Angle. This is not your typical chess podcast. If you're an amateur or club-level player, the Chess Angle is for you. Our content is aimed at busy adults who are serious about the game but have limited study time. Featured guests include both amateur and titled players alike. And now, here's your host, Director of the Long Island Chess Club, Neil Bellon.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. This week is all about draw offers, but before we get to that, we do have an email from our listener mailbag, so let's get to it.
You've got mail.
All right, so we have an email from Grandmaster Alex Lenderman, friend of the pod, fellow New Yorker, shout out to Brooklyn. And it's really great that we do have titled players who listen to the pod. I'm really honored that we have players of that level as part of our audience. And here's what Alex writes. Hi, Neil. Just wanted to mention a fun fact. I was listening to a few of your podcasts, and you mentioned several times the idea of playing quote-unquote nothing or waiting moves. I myself thrive in those kinds of moves. Many of my colleagues don't understand why I can play moves without much of an idea, but very often that's how I would end up winning in equal positions. So it's something that not only works at the amateur level, but also at the GM level. And then Alex went on to send me a PGN of the game. He was white. It was an English opening. His opponent was rated 23-29, and here's what Alex wrote in that follow-up message. He says, I think this game is a perfect example of when a waiting move can be very effective. I was playing a player who was in amazing form, 6 out of 8, with a chance to get a GM norm if he beat me last round. He equalized out of the opening, and I couldn't find a clear plan anymore, so I decided to sort of play a passing move, 18 Queen D1, since I couldn't find what else to do without hurting my position. Sure enough, my opponent more or less immediately reacted with something concrete, and with that, he clarified the situation for me, helping me win a nice game. The move I played, Queen D1, by the way, is engine approved, and the engine says it's one of the moves that maintains zeros. I have played many such games in my career, compensating for my lack of good calculation or strategic depth, of course, relative to my level. So that was from Alex Lenderman, Grandmaster, and I think there are two major takeaways. The first is that the idea of waiting moves or these sort of nothing moves, the fact that those are also effective at the GM level is fascinating because I generally preach that for the amateur level, but the fact that grandmasters use it as well, albeit at their level, is quite fascinating. Now, for those who may not have heard me speak about that previously, what I call a waiting move or a passing move or a nothing move, it's the type of move where it's very non-committal. You're not sure what to do. So rather than pushing the issue or trying to force something, you kind of play a nothing move. You sort of just shuffle a piece, that type of thing, or maybe, H3, A3, B3, something like that. A lot of times a passing move will be like shuffling a bishop. But anyway, you make a move that really doesn't change the nature of the position. There's really no threats. And the idea is that it's almost a dialogue, like you're saying to your opponent, I don't think either of us knows what to do, but I'm not going to force things. I want to see if you make a move first that will help me either win the game because it's a mistake or will help clarify things. It's almost like a game of chicken, but at the amateur level, I think waiting moves are very effective because very often your opponent may blunder. He might try to force things and won't have the patience to play a waiting move himself. But what was interesting about the way Alex phrased it is that his opponent really didn't blunder, but he clarified the position. And that's something that I really hadn't thought of. A waiting move may induce your opponent to blunder, but it also may induce him to play a move which then allows you to understand the position and find a plan. So it's almost like this little waiting game strategically that you do just to help you know how to proceed. And so in Alex's case, he wasn't sure what to do. His opponent really didn't blunder, but he made a concrete idea, right? He made a move that had a concrete reason and concrete idea behind it. And then Alex knew how to play the correct move. And these are grandmasters you're talking about. So if the idea of waiting moves is good enough at the grandmaster level, it's certainly good enough for the amateur level. So I thought that was a very, very interesting and fascinating commentary about the value of waiting moves at all levels. So Alex, shout out to you. Alex was on the pod previously. I'll put a link for that episode, and we're definitely going to have him back on at some point. Waiting moves will probably be part of our discussion, but I look forward to having Alex back on the pod. So thanks so much for your email. Now let's get to the main content for this week, which is draw offers. And I'm going to really kind of nerd out about draw offers. I think it's a fascinating topic, especially for those of us playing at the tournament level who are concerned about rating. I'm really looking forward to kind of diving into this. It's been on my mind for a while. And I want to give some context up front, sort of the framework for this episode. I'm going to be looking at draw offers specifically with rating in mind, with improving your rating, increasing your rating. And I just want to be clear about that. So if you're listening to this as sort of a hobbyist player, as a recreational player, as kind of a kitchen table player, that's fine. But keep in mind that I am discussing this as it relates to rating and using draw offers, accepting draw offers or making draw offers strategically to help improve your rating. Now, it's interesting. I was listening to the C-Squared podcast the other day, which is probably my favorite chess podcast, because, people ask me, like, do you listen to other chess podcasts? I mean, the one that I really listen to pretty regularly, the one where I try not to miss an episode, is the C-Squared podcast. I'm a big Fabiano fan. And they had on Maurice Ashley about a week or so ago. It's one of their recent episodes. And I absolutely love Maurice Ashley. I think he's a fantastic speaker. He was a phenomenal commentator. I don't think he's doing commentary anymore. He's an author, but he's a great guy to listen to. Anytime he's interviewed, I always catch it. He was on Adam Grant's podcast, Adam Grant, the psychologist, on, I think it's called Work Life with Adam Grant. It's in my feed. But Maurice Ashley is great. And what he was saying, because they were talking about improvement, Maurice Ashley was saying, we have to stop worrying about rating. Just do the work and you'll get better. Stop worrying about rating. And Christian Chirilla, one of the hosts, he chimes in. He's like, how can we do that? We're chess players. I mean, he was kind of joking, but you could tell there was a certain amount of seriousness to it. And I actually agree with Christian. I mean, what Maurice Ashley is saying about not worrying about rating and just do the work, he's correct, but that's too idealistic. As long as a rating system exists, and as long as the games are rated, and as long as you have a number assigned to you, people are always going to care about rating. All right, if you're a tournament player, you care about your rating. You may say you don't. You may say, well, I'm now focusing on the process. I'm not worried about, my wins and my rating. I'm just focusing on the process now. Yada, 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 all that stuff. But the truth is, if you're a tournament player, you care about your rating. And if you say you don't, I think you're in denial. Like, that's just my honest opinion. Some care about it more than others. But if you are a tournament player and you play in tournaments regularly, you care about your rating. So while I agree completely with Maurice Ashley that we shouldn't think about it and just focus on doing the work, he's absolutely right. Realistically, I agree with Christian Chirilla that it's almost impossible to do if you're a tournament player, because that number is always there and the rating system exists. I mean, the only way to not worry about rating would be if they eliminated the rating system. So the reason I went on that tangent is because that's how I'm looking at draws this week in terms of increasing your rating. Because you may say, well, Neil, why are you focusing on rating? Why are you obsessed with the rating? Because again, I'm looking at the concept of draw offers from the point of view of an over-the-board tournament player who's looking to boost his rating. So I fully admit up front that I am looking at it from that point of view, from, increasing your rating, which I think draws can help as far as draw offers, as far as offering a draw or accepting a draw. Very, very interesting psychological thing. So let's kind of break this down. Let's unpack this. So before we talk about the psychology of draw offers, let's discuss the rules. That is, how do you offer a draw? So the proper way to offer the draw, and I'm going by U.S. Chess Federation rules, I think FIDE is similar. It might be a little bit different. I'm not sure. I'm not really a FIDE person. But generally, the way to offer a draw is you wait until it's your turn to move. So your clock is running. You make your move. You then offer the draw, and then you hit your clock. Right? So you make your move, knight d6 check. I offer a draw. You hit your clock. That's the proper way to offer a draw. However, if you offer a draw in a different way, in other words, if it's your opponent's turn to move, or if you just blurt it out at any time, it still counts. And that's one thing that's funny about the rules. The rule book says that that's the proper way to offer a draw, but it should really be worded as the suggested way, because if you blurt out at any time, regardless of whose clock is running, if you say, I offer a draw, anything like that, it does count. So keep that in mind. And players of all levels, I know this from being a tournament director and running a chess club for years, players of all levels, from beginners all the way up through titled players, mess this up all the time, right? The proper way of making the offer, again, making your move, offering the draw, hitting your clock, they will change that around all the time. I've done that myself. Now, part of it comes from frustration, where you'll just say, I offer a draw, that type of thing, even though it's not the proper way to do it. It could be just from adrenaline or fatigue. So we all mess that up. But technically, the way that I mentioned before, that's the proper way to offer a draw. And you also have to be careful about what you say, because you don't want it to be viewed as gamesmanship. I think I spoke about this in a previous episode. Like, you can't say things like, well, I think it looks like a draw, to sort of gauge your opponent, like to kind of get into his head. Because if you say, as soon as you say the word draw, it's a draw. We had a situation like that where somebody said, I think it's a draw, and he shook hands, and the guy was like, I wasn't really making a draw offer, and I was right there, and I said, you said the word draw. I go, you can't play little games like that to kind of gauge your opponent's response. So don't say the word draw to your opponent unless you want to offer a draw. So just a couple of nuances about the rules. Now let's talk about accepting or rejecting a draw offer as far as the rules. So when someone offers you a draw, you can simply say something like, I decline, or I would like to play on. If you want to deny the draw, obviously, if you accept the draw, you say, I accept, you shake hands. And keep in mind, there's no time limit for you to accept the draw. So when someone offers a draw, you can take as much time as you want until your clock falls, technically, all right? So there's no limit. You could think for an hour or more. You can use as much time as you want, so keep that in mind. But very important, when someone offers you the draw, if they do it improperly, if they don't move first, you have every right to say, make you move first, and I'll think about it. Now, you got to be careful there. What can happen is, if they make a really, really good move that seems winning, well, then you can accept the draw. If they blunder, you can obviously deny the draw, but just keep in mind, if you say make you move first and I consider it, and they checkmate you, let's say you both didn't realize it was a mate and won, well, then you lost the game, because remember, mate trumps all. So you can't say, please make you move first and I consider it. He checkmates you, and then you're like, oh, I'll take that draw now. It doesn't work that way. It goes by what happened first, and mate, of course, trumps all. So you got to be aware of that. But if your opponent offers a draw and doesn't move first, you can and should say, make you move first, please, and they have to do that. And at that point, they can't take the draw offer back. Once they say, I offer a draw, they have to make a move, and then you get to decide. Also, regarding responding to a draw offer, if you touch a piece, that is a rejection of the draw offer, because remember, according to the rules, touching a piece is an obligation to move. So if your opponent says, I offer a draw, and then you touch a piece and realize, wait, if you move that piece, it's going to be a blunder, you can't say, okay, I'll take the draw. Now, you might get away with one because a lot of players aren't aware of that, or maybe they just want the draw so badly. So you could touch a piece and then say, okay, I accept the draw, and your opponent might still be okay with that. But technically, your opponent at that point has the right to say, no, you touched the piece. You have to move that now. You just rejected the draw offer, because remember, touching a piece is an obligation to move. So if you think you might want to accept the draw offer, do not touch a piece yet. Now, if the draw offer annoys you, and we'll talk more about that in a moment, about proper and improper draw offers, if you sort of want to convey to your opponent that you're annoyed at his draw offer, or you think that it was inappropriate, a good way to do that is to simply not respond, don't say anything, and to just move. Because remember, touching a piece or simply moving a piece also is a declination of the draw offer. And I notice a lot of players do that just to sort of not annoy their opponent, but to just kind of, give them a little attitude, to just kind of say, like, go fly a kite. I'm not taking your draw offer. You don't say anything. It's almost as if you didn't hear the draw offer, like you're ignoring your opponent, and you just think, and when you're ready to move, you just make your move. So you can reject the draw by simply moving the piece and not saying anything. Some players will be like, let me think about it. Or some players, if they deny the draw offer, they'll be like, I appreciate it, but I think I'm going to play on. Let's see what happens. I'll say that myself sometimes, depending on my opponent. But what some players do, and I'll do this myself, if I'm really annoyed at the draw off, or if my opponent is just being kind of annoying in some way, I simply won't say anything, and I'll just move a piece. It's kind of a nasty way of rejecting the draw offer, like you're not even acknowledging it. So those are some things to keep in mind regarding the rules as far as responding to a draw offer. Now, there are some times when you should not offer a draw as far as etiquette. Now, remember, if you offer a draw in a different way from making your move first, offering the draw, and hitting the clock, remember, it still counts. But there are times where offering a draw is considered poor etiquette or unsportsmanlike. For example, if you're in a completely losing position, unless your opponent's flag is about to fall or something, if you're completely losing, like if you just hung a piece or you hung your queen, you don't want to offer a draw. That's considered rude and unsportsmanlike. A lot of kids do that. Like they'll hang their queen and then they're like, oh, I'll offer a draw. You want a draw? That happens all the time. But I can tell you, I've seen this with adults, even with titled players. There was one club here on Long Island a while back. It wasn't the Long Island Chess Club. It was a different one, where a master, a 2200 rated player, was playing an expert, and they were both in a bit of time pressure. The master blundered and was clearly losing, and he kept offering a draw, which leads me to the other things. Repeated draw offers are also considered unsportsmanlike. And what happened was, this was a full-blown adult, I don't know, maybe 35, 38 years old, like mid to late 30s, something like that. And he blundered, and he kept offering a draw like every other move. I offer a draw. I offer a draw. I was really surprised that someone of that level, who has initials in front of his name, would do that. But this game does crazy things to you. I guess the adrenaline, he didn't want to lose. But there's a story of even a chess master who was offering a draw in an unsportsmanlike way. He was a series of repeated draw offers in a losing position. It happens. I've seen it. The other thing I consider improper, and particularly at the club level, is when people offer a draw within the first 10 moves. I don't think that's right. Now, if we're talking about two GMs and it's a major tournament and someone's trying to get a norm or a prize, I get it. I still don't like early draws at all levels, but at the grandmaster level, there's probably a lot of reasons that I don't fully comprehend myself why they would do that as far as prizes and norms. So I'm not going to get into that. But as far as the club level, which is what this podcast is all about, I do not agree with those early draws. All right, the club level is about playing the game out. I know at our club, the Long Island Chess Club, we do have a rule that I instituted where the players cannot agree to a draw prior to 25 moves being made. And I only instituted that because there was an issue with a couple of players who kept doing that. I won't get into the details now, but we do have that rule in place, which I think is fair. It's not like I'm saying you have to play at least 40 moves. I think 25 moves is fair. And again, the rule is that you can't have a draw by agreement prior to 25 moves. I'm not talking about like threefold repetition or something like that. But I don't want players to come to the club and, E4, E5, and they agree to a draw. Not at the club level. That's not right, in my opinion. Coming up, we're going to look at some well-known books that are out there and what they have to say about draw offers and whether you should use them as an amateur player and how to approach them. That's coming up right after these messages. Okay, so here's what I want to do. I want to give my general opinion about draw offers at the amateur level. Then I want to look at what some other well-known chess writers have said. And then I'm going to go back to my opinion and kind of break it down in detail. All right, so here's my general opinion. I do believe at the amateur level, as an over-the-board tournament player, that judiciously accepting or offering a draw can actually add a lot of points to your rating. I do agree with that. Now, when we had on Rob Guevara, who is a national master who does not take draws, he hates draw offers, he won't take them. It was a fascinating episode. I remember Rob sort of rubbed off on me for a while, and I think I even said in the episode, like, I'm going to try that. I'm going to not take draws. But the truth is, that didn't really last very long. And there's a number of reasons I'll detail in a moment why I do believe that draw offers can help you and why having an attitude of, I'm never going to accept a draw offer is not always correct. Just my opinion. I don't want to sound like I'm telling you what to do. I'm just kind of sharing my opinion. But Rob's viewpoint about never taking a draw, it was actually quite fascinating. And an argument could be made, that I'm wrong and that he's right, that, you should never take a draw offer as an amateur player. I don't agree with that. Like I said, I'm going to explain why in a minute. But I'll link up that episode with Rob in case you didn't catch it, because that was one of the most fascinating interviews I've done as far as the psychological aspect of it. And one very important concept to keep in mind in this discussion on draw offers is the idea of loss aversion. Now, what loss aversion is, this is not just a chess thing, although chess is an excellent example of it. It's a glaring example of it. What loss aversion is, it applies to all competition. It's the idea that the pain of losing is a more intense emotion than the thrill of winning. That's what loss aversion is. And chess players definitely suffer from loss aversion. We really don't want to lose a game. And that's why draw offers are so powerful, because you're basically saying to your opponent, I'm throwing you a rope, I'm throwing you a lifeline, right? I'm giving you a chance to not lose the game. That's very powerful, especially for us tournament players where we have fragile egos, we don't want to lose. And when that draw offer comes your way, it's like, I can just accept this offer and walk out of the tournament hall and I didn't lose my game. It's very, very tempting. So I want you to keep that idea of loss aversion in mind throughout this episode, because that's sort of a blanket throughout this whole discussion, the whole psychology of draw offers and why they're so effective. So what I'm going to read now, this is from Jeremy Silman, who is my guy, love his writing. This is from the Complete Book of Chess Strategy, and I'll link up that book. I've spoken about it before. I think it's probably the best one-and-done chess book out there. If you're kind of looking for a chess book that sort of covers everything, a reference book that covers sort of every topic on a basic level, that's the one you want to get, in my opinion. But here's what I.M. Silman, the late, great Jeremy Silman, wrote about draw offers. Too many people are afraid to lose. This may sound trite, but we are all going to lose lots and lots of chess games. Instead of playing like a coward, go all out to win each and every game. You should look at a loss as a learning experience and accordingly should refuse all draw offers, even from much higher rated opponents. unless you feel you stand considerably worse. The following pointers are worth considering. 1. When you sit down to play, get excited about the prospect of learning something new. Number 2, accepting a quick draw from an opponent of any rating won't allow you to learn anything. Play until the board is sterile. Number 3, when a higher rated player offers you a draw, he is either ill or feels he is in serious trouble. Look at his offer as a sign of weakness and play confidently for the win. If you go on to lose the game, you will get a lesson that you would have missed if the draw had been accepted. Number 4, never offer a draw. You can do this when you are a professional, but until that time, throw that option out of the window. And then there's a little subsection to that. He says, A, if you are playing against a weaker player, a draw offer doesn't make any sense at all. Aren't you expected to beat that guy? And B, if you're playing against an equal player, a draw offer denotes fear. C, finally, if you are playing against a higher rated player, it is simply rude to offer a draw. Why? Because he, the higher rated player, will offer that draw when and if he wants one. Your offer will be met with a refusal and an insulted look. He will also know you're terrified and gain strength from that knowledge. Number 5, when word gets out that you play until the bitter end, everyone will start to fear you. A fearless opponent generates panic in everyone. And then number 6, he simply goes through the correct way to offer a draw, which I covered. But then he goes on to say this: if your opponent offers you a draw before he has made his move, a common but illegal practice, you are well within your rights to just sit quietly and wait for him to either move a piece or lose on time. However, the most polite and to the point answer is, make your move and I'll consider it. Your opponent's incorrect draw offer can't be retracted, and you have the right to accept it until you say no or until you make your move, which automatically is taken as a refusal. The quote-unquote make your move and I'll consider it reply gives you a lot of flexibility. If your adversary finds a winner, you can simply shake his hand and make a game-saving draw. If he plays a blunder, you can refuse and go on to smash him. Of course, if his move keeps the game even, you should also play on and see if you can wear him down. Now, this next book, this is from The Survival Guide to Competitive Chess by Grandmaster John Emms. We discussed this in a previous episode. John Emms was a guest on the podcast, and we spoke about this book at length. To me, this is one of the most underrated books in all of the literature as far as practical advice for amateur players. I'm surprised more people don't know about it because when I mention it, a lot of people haven't heard of it. I'm going to link it up. But here's what he writes. Again, this is from the Survival Guide to Competitive Chess about draw offers. You're going to see it's very different from what I Am Jeremy Silman said, and then I'm going to tell you where I stand. I remember a well-known grandmaster once saying that knowing when to offer a draw is a skill that can add a significant number of points to your rating. I agree with this, and I definitely think this subject deserves a few words. Draw offers are of significant practical importance. They are not merely a way of saying you are happy with a draw. In fact, in certain cases, the player offering the draw is not happy at all with the thought of a draw. Grandmaster Nigel Davies has said that he's found draw offers to be of good practical value when his opponent has the better position but is not handling his clock too well. In this case, a draw offer is a way of asking if he wants to roll the dice, and thinking about this question, i.e. using more clock time, can tip the odds further against him should he decline. I've certainly used this technique before, and I know countless others who have too. Talking of offering draws at the right time, a skill which I've already touched upon in Chapter 1, is the ability to offer a draw just before your opponent realizes how good his position is. In certain cases, the position in which the draw offer is made may initially look difficult to assess, but after a few more natural moves are played out, it becomes clear what is happening. So timing here is really important. In the following game, I suspect that my draw offer on move 32 came just in time. let's first of all see some of the build-up play. And then he goes on to show some games. Now, for me, what I just read from the Survival Guide to Competitive Chess, that is spot on. So even though I'm a Silman guy, I do disagree with his philosophy about draw offers. I agree with John Ems that it can really help your rating and can be a very smart choice when used judiciously. Of course, you want to play every game to win. That should be the goal from move one. But there comes a time, depending on the situation and what's happening on the board and how you're feeling and whether you're winning or losing, where draw offers can be an excellent choice and might be the best choice. Now, I want to go back to what Silman said and kind of pick some of this apart. Now, he says accepting a quick draw from an opponent of any rating won't allow you to learn anything. Play until the board is sterile. Yeah, that's kind of a new age ooey gooey, right? You're not going to learn anything with a draw. He's right. But remember, we're talking about rating here. I made that clear in the beginning. I'm talking about draw offers in the context of increasing your rating and being a tournament player in the amateur chess scene now, which is extremely competitive, extremely difficult. And while it's true, you probably will learn more if you play the game out. I'll give him that. From a rating standpoint, I do have to disagree. Now, I agree with him when he says if you're playing against a weaker player, a draw offer doesn't make sense. That I agree with 100%. Right? If you have kind of an equal position, you have to trust that the low-rated player is going to blunder. I know if I'm playing a game, unless my clock is about to fall now, that's different. Time pressure and the clock is a huge factor in draw offers. So if a low-rated player offers me a draw and my flag is about to fall and I really don't think I can hold it, obviously I'll take it because I don't want to lose the game. And remember, that's an example of, quote unquote, increasing your rating, because by putting my ego aside and seeing that my clock is going to fall and that I'm probably not going to be able to, win the position even with the increment, by accepting the draw against the low-rated player, yes, I'm losing some points, but I'm losing significantly less points than if I let my ego get in the way and my flag falls and then I lose the game. So that's what Ems meant when he said about how using draw offers can boost your rating. It can boost your rating by minimizing the losses, right? By sort of cutting your losses and at least escaping with the half point, right? You'll get hit with a little bit of a rating loss, but not as much as if you had lost the game, if your opponent is much lower rated. But if I don't have an issue with my clock and a lower rated player offers a draw, I'm not taking it, because I just believe that my opponent will make a mistake and I'll wait for it. Now, if my opponent doesn't make a mistake, if my lower rated opponent goes down to the bitter end, then I tip my hat. Say, okay, you played well, you got the draw, good game. And it's the same when I play a higher rated opponent. Now, I'll talk about offering a draw to a higher rated opponent in a minute, but very often in an equal position, I'll offer a draw to a higher rated player. A lot of them won't take it because they think I'm going to blunder. So that's just how it goes, right? Now, Silman says if you're playing against an equal player, a draw offer denotes fear. That could be true sometimes, but it could also denote that the person truly believes that it's drawn and that there's nothing that, no one has winning chances. You're basically just shuffling pieces. It could mean that. So not necessarily. I mean, it could mean the person's tired. It could mean they're not feeling well. There's a lot of things at play. Now, I disagree with Silman that it's rude to offer a draw against a higher rated player. I disagree. Now, let me define higher rated player. If I'm playing like a grandmaster, yes, then it's rude, because that's not higher rated. That's like a whole different universe. But if you're playing someone 300-400 points higher than you, if the position's equal, it is not rude to offer the higher rated player a draw. I completely disagree. If the position's equal, you have every right to offer the draw if your opponent is higher rated. I completely disagree that that's poor etiquette. Now, your higher rated opponent is probably not going to take it unless his flag is going to fall or unless he feels he's losing. But the idea that it's improper or unsportsmanlike to offer a draw because your opponent is higher rated, I completely disagree. I go by the position. And the other reason I will sometimes offer draws against higher rated opponents is because, it's what I call an offensive draw offer. It's sort of a way to get into the person's head. Now, remember, it's against the rules to annoy or distract your opponent or do anything unsportsmanlike. but you can use a draw offer strategically. Like you can use a draw offer. This is what Ems was saying in his book. You can use a draw offer even if you're not sure if you want one, just to kind of mess with your opponent's head. Because what happens is when you offer the draw, if your opponent turns it down, the pressure is on him now because you're basically saying, I'm giving you a way out. If he says no, he's going to feel this pressure to win now, and it might mess with his head, might make him force things. So that's something to keep in mind. I will sometimes do that depending on my opponent, just to kind of mess with their head a little bit, just to see how they'll react. Also, if I'm playing a higher rated opponent and the position's equal, and especially if we're kind of in the end game, it's almost my way of saying, in a sportsman-like way, it's kind of my way of saying, like, dude, you're like 400 points higher than I am, but I'm holding my own. Like, just a little reminder, like, you're not beating me. It's kind of a way of, because you have to be competitive like that. Not in an unsportsmanlike way, but when you offer the higher rated opponent a draw, you're basically saying, like, you got nothing. Like, what have you got? Right? You're going to deny my draw offer? Fine. What have you got? And they might try too hard to win and force something. So I disagree with Silman because a draw offer against a higher rated opponent can be very, very powerful. But again, you have to do it in a position where you feel you're equal or maybe slightly better. Now, offering a draw to a higher rated opponent, if you're losing, yes, that would be unsportsmanlike. But if the position's equal, rating doesn't matter. That's basically the best way I can say it. You should go by the position. And I once did have a draw with a 2000 player. This was many years ago. And I actually offered him a draw and he took it. And he actually told me, he agrees with me. He goes, I go by the position. Because we were actually talking and I said, is that considered weird that I was low rate? He goes, no. He goes, I go by the position. And he goes, like, you were playing well enough that he goes, if my low rated opponent clearly knows what he's doing and hasn't blundered the whole game and it's like a sterile position, he goes, I'll just take the draw. Once I see that the low rated opponent has kind of established himself, that he knows what he's doing and there's no indication that he might blunder, he goes, I'll just take the draw because I go by the position. Now, that was him. Other higher rated players, generally myself included, will not take the draw. I mean, like I said, this is very, very interesting stuff. All right, so I disagree with Silman there. Now, going to the Ems book, The Survival Guide to Competitive Chess, when he says that very first sentence, right, knowing when to offer a draw is a skill that can add a significant number of points to your rating, amen to that. Like, I completely agree, and that's kind of what we're talking about in this episode. And he also mentions those sort of offensive draw offers where you offer a draw, but you're not sure if you want one. Now, again, if your opponent's clock is running low and he has a slightly better position, that's when you want to offer the draw. That's kind of that was that whole Nigel Davies example. So if he's winning, but his flag is about to fall, you're basically saying, I'm going to give you an out. And that puts a lot of pressure because that person's thinking, oh man, if I run out of time, I could have taken that draw. And then, of course, they're wasting time on their clock thinking about it. Factoring in the clock as far as when you offer the draw is definitely huge. Because if your opponent has a lot of time on his clock, he or she is less likely to accept the draw. If they're running low on time, they're more likely to accept the draw. Now, what I'm finding is we're getting a lot of newer players as far as the pandemic and Queen's Gambit effect, and they're not taking draws at all. And they're also not resigning. And that sort of ties in with this. A couple of things there. Let's take the not resigning first. That's really part of the culture. That's part of the zeitgeist now, the whole non-resigning thing. I think it comes from playing online because people online, they play quick time controls. And so they never resign because, in a 3-minute game, anything can happen. And then that mentality transfers over to the club, even though it's a slow time control. So players don't resign anymore. Now, it used to bother me because I was sort of old school like that. My whole thinking was, okay, if you lost a piece clean, with no compensation, you should resign, right? If you lost your queen with no compensation, you should resign. That's the proper thing to do, like old school. But I've let that go because now nobody resigns anymore. It's very interesting how that changed. It used to bother me a lot, and now I let it go. If I win a piece and my opponent resigns, I'm like surprised now. Whereas like 15 years ago, if I won a piece and they resigned, you would almost expect that. But I'm seeing it even from experienced club players now, like players rated 16, 17, 1800. Like I'll win a piece even later in the game. I mean, it's clear they have nothing and they won't resign. That's just how the game is now. And as far as draw offers, I'm getting a lot of like, oh, well, my coach doesn't want me to accept a draw. My coach wants me to play it till the bitter end, which I'm going to be honest, if it's a kid, I kind of get that, right? If it's like a 15-year-old kid, even a teenager, like a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 12-year-old, and they're being coached and their coach tells them, look, just, don't accept a draw, don't resign, just play till the end. I guess I kind of get that because they're still developing and still learning. I still believe, everything I said earlier that, if you're an experienced tournament player and you're really looking to boost your rating, using draw offers, knowing when to accept it or offer it can really be a great way to boost your rating or to maintain your current rating. See, when I say boost your rating, I also, include in that not losing rating points, right? So using draw offers strategically, let's say in a 5-round tournament, that could be the difference. Let's say you didn't have a great tournament overall. Using draw offers strategically, that could be the difference between losing, say, 20 points off your rating or losing, 10 points off your rating. Or instead of losing 25 points from your rating, you might lose 15 points from your rating or 12 points, which over time, that's a lot of points. You have to think sort of like big picture. Now, one other thing I forgot to mention, I should have mentioned this earlier when I spoke about playing a higher rated opponent and offering a draw against a higher rated opponent. The beauty about higher rated opponents is that you have something called draw odds, or at least that's a term I've heard used to describe it. Remember, when you play a higher rated opponent, you have 2 ways to gain rating points. A win, obviously, but also a draw, right? When you play someone equal or lower rated, the draw is not really going to affect you as far as increasing your rating. So against an equal opponent, a draw offer is not really going to change anything. But against a lower rated opponent, you're actually going to lose some points. So the beauty about high rated opponents, again, you have 2 ways to win. So keep that in mind when you offer a draw to a higher rated opponent. If he accepts, you are going to gain some rating points. So keep that in mind, the concept of draw odds. And when a higher rated opponent offers you the draw, be very careful before you say no quickly, because remember, when a higher rated opponent offers you a draw, that's instant rating points. Now you can make the argument, Neil, you're getting too obsessed with numbers and with rating. You shouldn't automatically accept a draw offer against a higher rated opponent just for the rating points. I'm not saying that. I'm simply saying that if a higher rated opponent offers you a draw and the position is equal or unclear, think very, very carefully about denying that draw, because if you turn that draw down and you lose the game, that's one of the worst feelings. Now, obviously, if a higher rated opponent offers you a draw and you see the win, or maybe you're just feeling good, maybe it's equal, but there's something, you got the fire in your belly, don't take the draw, okay? But if you're feeling kind of insecure about the position and the higher rated opponent offers you a draw, seriously consider taking it. Now, Silman is right, where if a higher rated opponent offers you the draw, he's probably thinks he's losing, or he's not feeling well or something like that. But I've gotten draw offers from higher rated opponents where the position was equal. And when I put it in the engine after, I was correct. It could be that they're not feeling well. It could be like that expert I mentioned earlier. Some higher rated opponents will go by the position and they don't really get obsessive about the fact that their opponent's low rated. A lot of psychology there. Obviously, if your position is better against the higher rated opponent and you see a win, or if you're just winning outright, don't take the draw. But again, if it's equal or unclear and the higher rated opponent offers you a draw, seriously consider taking it, because that's an easy, 10, 12, 15 rating points. I know I'm going to be accused of like selling out for saying that, but these are things you have to think about in terms of your rating. And that's kind of what they were talking about in the M's book. So to summarize this, I think draw offers, when used methodically and strategically and smartly, are an important tool in your tournament toolbox. They can really help increase your rating and or prevent your rating from decreasing. I think it's something to think about. I think it's very important. I don't agree on absolutes. Like, I don't agree that you should never take a draw, but I also don't agree that you should always take a draw or offer one. But I think, again, when used judiciously and in the right circumstances, it can really help your rating as an amateur over-the-board tournament player. Very, very interesting topic. I'm sure we'll revisit this, looking at it through a different lens at some point. But at any rate, really appreciate all of your support of the show. Thank you for listening, and I hope you win your next game. Have a great day, everybody.